workshop on the Vtpeir, which is going to run from 1 to 4 o'clock. I'll open the workshop.
Where is it?
And you got everybody, right? And then Member Sari is going to guide us through the section of public comments that we're going to try to address today. And I don't think we're going to get through all of them. So first, to focus on what we're doing here, it's really addressing the 60-day comments, 60-day comment period, comments received by May 31st. That's all we're looking at today is those comments received during that 60-day comment period. And I'm going to let Edith Hannigan frame the process where we've been, how many workshops we've had today, and what the timeline is likely to be for coming back once we're done with this process for board action at some point.
Sure. Good afternoon. Edith Hannigan, board staff. So this is the 4th workshop addressing the public comments received between April 1st and May 31st, 2016 on the Vegetation Treatment Program Programmatic EIR. Since we've had 3 of these workshops already, board members have in front of them, and a copy will go online this evening, of a revised version of the comment matrix that they've been working off of. And none of the content in the matrix has been changed, but I have revised. If the comment was already discussed at a workshop, it's been grayed out, and all of the white comments are remaining comments that have yet to be addressed. I've talked with Member Husari about the prioritization of addressing which comments we'll be addressing today, and it'll mostly work through in order, starting, I think it was on page 9, of the comments that are in white. And I think we'll get through a significant portion of unaddressed comments. Some comments we're leaving in order to get input from our legal counsel on them, so we're not going to we won't be addressing those at the workshop, but we are getting advice on how to proceed with those. In terms of a timeline for addressing the comments and revising the document, the VTP team has scheduled a couple meetings in between now and the next board meeting to begin revising comments and looking at the scope of revisions to the document that will be required based on the board's responses to public comments in the last 3 and then this workshop. So I don't know. Dave, you might want to address this more specifically. I don't think we'll have a fully revised version by January 24th, our next meeting, but I do think we'll have a very clear picture of the scope of those revisions. And if they're minor, then I guess we might have a draft for you, but we'll at least be present to you our forward progress at the January meeting at the least. I could say that.
Anything else from the team that you want to update the board about? Before we delve into the comments, starting with page 9, I think is where we're going.
Gabe Schultz of Cal Fire. Just like Edith mentioned, we're reconvening the team. We've had a chance to look at the board's comments from the previous workshops. We've itemized which ones would be best for each member just to tackle. Our hope is to maximize our time and have it just identified just correctly to make the adjustments as soon as possible. In a lot of cases, the adjustments, I think, are, from our perspective, going to be pretty good adjustments for us to make in a timely fashion. So depending on how far we're able to progress for the day, I would like to push the team to try to get you the revisions by the January meeting, and if not, hopefully, just as Edith mentioned, we'll definitely be able to offer just a clear picture of what those look like.
Thanks, Dave.
I do have one quick correction to something I said. For people online, on the board's meeting material website, there is a copy of the revised matrix. I forgot I had done that last week. So it is available online for people interested in looking at what the board is looking at.
Board member, any questions for you before we start? I appreciate Broussari and Ms. Hannigan put in the time in ahead of time so that we can make the most out of our time today. And I'll turn it over to Member Broussari.
So we're going to start on page 9 of the comments, and the reason we're starting on page 9 is because we're actually, because of when workshops began and stopped, we didn't finish some of the topics, and we need to go back and clean them up. So page 9, U1, from a professor at Cal State University, Bakersfield, on program effect. So these are on program effectiveness. So do you want to? You started looking at these, Mark. Do you want to start with us because he did talk to this individual, right?
Yeah. So both of this comment and the following comment have a similar theme that concerned around the ineffectiveness, especially of mastication in chaparral ecotypes, and that it actually the potential to not only introduce non-native species but grasses, and it may actually improve or increase fire carrying. Especially early in seasons when maybe the chaparral might have a higher percent moisture, but the grasses might dry out quicker and actually be a better carrier for fire. So in some cases, not just the fragmentation of the chaparral was a concern, but also the potential to actually increase fire hazard with grasses and faster, where the chaparral might hold up onto the land longer. Now, the conversation I had with Brandon was he was pretty candid that he was more looking at the landscape around public lands, especially Forest Service lands and the grapevine and things like that, and wasn't really thinking about private property, WUI kinds of issues. And when we started talking about that, he actually was like, I asked him, like, well, what do you suggest? If we don't do this, what do we do? And as we probably can appreciate, he talked about land use, he talked about roofs, he talked about things that we don't have jurisdiction over, that we can't do much about. So that kind of left me in the quandary. These comments are, I think, probably important and real, and we probably need to think about chaparral in a different way than you normally do, and it highlighted the complexity of dealing with the California plant communities. And that I think we should probably pull out chaparral in some bit of a sophisticated way to put some boundaries on what are some ways that we need to think about vegetation management around chaparral communities in Southern California especially. But in spite of the comments not necessarily being totally appropriate. That's as far as I can go right now.
So do we have any direction of the team on whether we want any changes made relative to these comments? This would be U1 and U2.
I just had a question, a reminder, relative to invasive species, relative to the concerns that were brought forth. Our standard project requirements dealing with that, and then our project analysis dealing with that. I guess that would be my question for the team as a reminder, how are those already addressed? This isn't the first time I've heard them, but it sounds like it's a nice, they've been presented succinctly.
Well, when I look over the checklist has those, you need to address those issues, both in terms of post-treatment restoration, but also in terms of what the impact is going to be in the habitat itself. So there is, but again, it's a checklist, so there's a concern, I think, that the checklist could be, doesn't go through the whole process, right? So that there may be, I don't want to use the word shortcut, but maybe not as rigorous as it could be around those ecosystems that are, there's a high level of investment in the integrity of those systems, and so you have a higher level of maybe public interest around that than you would normally in other places in the state.
So, I mean, this is kind of swirling around the issue of why we got to the format of this Vtpeir, that we did kind of break out that ecosystem and have measures, and it's quite a bit different now. So is some of that maybe the conversation related to they were still thinking how it was when it started, or has he checked out the revisions?
I don't know that answer.
Yeah, okay.
I do know that there's a lot of version issues around our comment letters. People not only misunderstanding the scope of the program, but also reacting to unrevised versions. So I think that is a problem, right? It is. And it's hard for me to. I'm coming late on the process, so I don't know how to address that.
I do think there's one topic that the team did a really good job of beefing this up, but I don't recall, and we could look, but the issue of seasonality relative to early curing of grasses that have replaced chaparral in treated areas, and the extension of fire season as a result of that in treated areas. I don't recall that being addressed, and we might want to, that might be one portion of this that might be worth addressing. That when you remove chaparral, it's it has high fuel moisture in the early part of the season, and then it takes a while to cure, but if you replace it with grasses, or if grasses come in, annual grasses in particular, they do cure. The thing that the commenter misses is that the difference in fire intensity, flame length, in grass versus chaparral, and that it is easier for firefighters to deal with.
And he mentioned that on the phone with me, so that was acknowledged. So.
That's really, for me, that's the one portion of these comments I think we could ask for a little bit more clarification on. And if it turns out it's already clarified, then it is. I don't know whether you guys recall.
Explain the goal of modifying fire behavior, right? Always repeated ignitions or flammability, flame length factors in that.
This actually correlates to a few other public comments as well. So we'll be revisiting this just as a team to make sure just that it is covered, and this will be part of our presentation to you next month.
I would, if possible, I would add, if you could address specific sort of high visible areas of biodiversity around chaparral and engage some of the stakeholders around that would be super helpful. I mean, that Santa Monica recreation area, I'm not sure. National recreation area. I know it's national, but there's a it would be helpful if there was some conversations around how the WUIs and some of these national parks interact in a way that we could engage some of these comments and not dismiss them, but put them in the right context. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, everybody ready to move on forward? Okay, we're going to address a couple of comments. There are two of them from Tom Dudley next, again on program effectiveness, U6 and I don't know what happened to U7, but it goes from U6 to U9. I guess because he made comments on other topics. I know why. Okay. So this is more on the same theme. And actually, I did not see that there was a lot of additional information besides what the last comments brought out. They're a little bit more specific. It appears to me that by addressing the previous two comments and the other comments of a similar nature, we would also be addressing these, unless somebody had some additional thoughts on this particular commenter.
That's my reading.
Okay, so Edith, is that sufficient?
Mm-hmm.
Lump it with the other two and some other comments that were similar. So that takes us through what we haven't covered on page 9 and 10 and moves us on to A28. Ann Peggy, who is actually the former supervisor of the Cleveland National Forest, and she's now on the Community Forest Advisory Board for the City of San Diego. This part of her comments I thought was pretty positive. She seems to support field treatment in conjunction and understands that there are other concerns related to that the board does not have jurisdiction over that also need to be addressed for a successful program.
It might be nice for the team to actually make some clear statements about not promising that this will do everything, to not let the people get. I don't remember if it says it explicitly, but it'd be nice if it said explicitly that this is one of multiple strategies and not meant to be everything. I'm sure it does somewhere, but.
Well,
It's complementary.
if it doesn't have it in there now, I mean, that was the last workshop. We had countless points here that was what the teams, one way or another, we need to, it's probably in there, just needs to be re-emphasized because it was clear the public thinks this is the only game in town when it's very obvious there's multiple things that add to protecting the public and the resources and everything. So I think if the teams kind of got that message pretty clearly last time, right, Gabe? Yeah. And so this is another one you could add to that list of trying to knock off of that same answer, same approach.
Visual diagram could be helpful. Like super obvious. Like this is the areas that would, I don't know.
Okay, so that'll be covered when we re-emphasize what the jurisdiction of the board is, what field treatment is intended to do, and how it needs to work in a complementary manner with other programs managed by CAL FIRE, but also by other agencies and by local jurisdictions through planning. Okay, the next comment, A29, is from Fred Blatt, the North Coast Regional Water Quality Board.
That must have a letter that goes with it, or more detail.
Well, it does have a letter in the letter binder.
Pretty straightforward.
Oh yeah, what the letter.
Why would they give a letter? I mean, it's a comment in support of the Vtpeir. So unless the letter says something that's not captured here, it appears to be thumbs up.
No, I think it
seems like there's something, but that's all there was.
Well, there were other sections of the letter that are categorized in a different part of the Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheet. Okay, so there's, thank you. All right.
No, I pulled up their letter. It's one page. So we fully support. Additional, you're missing. Please call us, contacts. They have an attached letter where they found some errors, but yeah, they would be in different sections. They look like more radical changes. So I'd take it as a thumbs up.
Do we recall a letter from the Regional Water Quality Control Board that had recommendations that were significant? Or
Different?
different?
Ruco. It's been a while since I've read the Central Valleys, and a lot of the North Coast Board kind of built upon the Central Valleys letter. They must have seen it before they had written their letter. And I think the Central Valley Board had some comments about requiring more detail for these. We've identified like a threshold of intensive field treatment activity that sort of with the additional hydrologic analysis that is done. Appendix. Remember what appendix that is? But basically, it says that once you achieve a certain threshold based on the amount of disturbance per planning watershed, it kicks you into another series of analysis. And as a team, we're actually even debating whether we should just make those sorts of watersheds fall outside the scope of the VTP altogether and just do a supplemental to go with it, because a supplemental would be just an additional hydrologic analysis. We're still kind of discussing that with legal internally, just how to deal with that from a CEQA perspective. So they're asking for more detail on what that analysis would look like, but we're kind of at a decision point whether to actually just take those intensively kind of treated areas and just move them outside the scope of the VTP.
But that's in the Central Valley letter, right?
Yeah, but
which is what they reference.
Yeah, and that's the most substantive
Yeah.
comment without having the Central Valley letter in front of me. That was by far the most substantive comment that they had. I can't quite remember exactly what else their comment letter had. I remember that's the one that sort of stood out to me as being the most important one. I think that in general the tone was supportive, and I've actually talked with program manager at the Central Valley Water Board, and they actually are supportive of this work in terms of for providing watershed benefits.
So Edith, do you know whether we have addressed the Central Valley Water Board's letter yet, or whether we're going to get to it later?
Excuse me. I don't think we've addressed that letter in any very substantively. I think a lot of their comments are under like the environmental impacts analysis.
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Yeah.
Well, maybe by that time the team will have had a chance to discuss the topic more and get back when we get to that letter, because we're probably not going to get to it today. We can talk about it again. Are everybody okay with that comment? The next one, and I'll give you a little background on this because it's kind of interesting. I have a lot of, actually quite a bit of, have had lots of interaction with Santa Monica National Recreation Area when I worked with the National Park Service. The letter from David Szymanski, he is the superintendent of the park. And Santa Monica National Recreation Area was envisioned as a very large park. It was, the boundary was defined, and for a lot of reasons, and this is quite a long time ago, the park was only able to acquire a small amount of the land within the boundary. So you can, they own 25,000 acres, I think, and it was defined as a much larger area originally in the legislation, but the money never came to acquire the rest of the land. So the park has a lot of uninterrupted chaparral in really very good condition, and have fire ecologists on staff, or have had fire ecologists on staff, who were really pioneers in this idea that treating, well, first of all, that we were losing lots of chaparral to frequent fire, but also that field treatment might not be all that effective, and that there was a high level of diversity. So that's where this comes from. But they have done a lot of monitoring, and have also have had staff that focused on this issue for a long time. So there's 4 comments. The superintendent, I'm sure that the comments come from resource management staff. He's a fairly recent arrival, but it is a comment from the National Park Service and from the head of that particular park. Anyway, but it's very similar to the comments that have come from some of the other organizations that have commented on management of chaparral in that area.
What's the ownership pattern? So within the area that was originally proposed for this larger park, and then it became actually a smaller park, the remaining areas are under whose ownership?
Well, most of it, there's some state parks, but there's also quite a bit of private land.
Okay.
And there's a lot of issues with creating defensible space around properties that are within areas that were acquired. It's been an issue at that park for a long time. But they had done quite a bit of, the park had done quite a bit of prescribed burning out of season under the first fire management officer that they had there, and really did type convert quite a few. A lot of their concerns come from the issue that they type converted quite a bit of the park to annual grassland, and through repeated applications of fire. So they have some personal experience with it. Plus, the park's been impacted by a number of large fires that burned under more extreme conditions, and they were able to experience that and see the impacts or the value of some of the field treatments or not.
Was A100 from the Park Service?
Mixed source.
I'll explain who he is in a little while, and how that letter ended up in here, and Edith can explain. But I think the ones to look at are through A92. A100 is a letter from a Park Service employee, but Edith, I don't think he was representing the Park Service. He was a private citizen. Is that not correct?
Well, it was sent from his Park Service email.
Oh, it was from an email, Park Service email.
Yeah, so, there are several people who...
Oh, yeah, he says he is, yeah.
This letter from Mr. Taylor, it wasn't addressed to the board. You can kind of tell from his vernacular. But it was submitted along with several other email addresses. It was submitted to our email address where we were collecting public comment on the vegetation treatment program within the time frame that we were accepting comments on it. So we decided to err on the side of including his comments in for your review and consideration, even though he's not necessarily directly addressing the board. I'd
I'd recommend that Szymanski's comments be addressed first, and then we deal with the Robert Taylor comments because of the context. But the one thing, when I read this, I thought the one thing that they brought up that we might want to ask the team to address more fully is basically interaction of drought and also die-off from sod with fuel treatments and so forth. I think it is already in the document, but it might be reinforced. Especially, and I know you're rewriting, Drew, I believe, the cumulative impacts section, aren't you? Or if someone is?
Well, as I discussed earlier, that piece with those intensively treated watersheds, that may be removed from. We may just create a threshold that excludes projects out of the scope of PIR. That's again
Out of the scope of the plan.
Yeah. So that if we do that, that would be changed.
Well, what about the the synergism between die-off from sod or all these beetles and fuel treatment, because that's a big part, and also the long-term drought or the interaction with climate change. Is that addressed?
We stay away from those subject matters within the scope of this PIR, given the parameters as to the three general WUI, fuel break, and the eco restoration.
Were people dialed in online? Yeah, we had 3 people online, so if you guys can maybe sit up closer, because we usually need to use the mic from time to time. Might make it easier.
Yeah, we always wonder why you guys sit in the back.
You can't see the
Oh, you can't see the screen.
That's
Okay.
the
I bet you
Yeah.
can from that front row. Look right up there.
I can't. That actually.
It's always about us, but it's really about the screen, huh?
Originally, no. I mean, the way we categorize and we're evaluating the vegetation treatment of the VTP versus the epidemic just of the bark beetle and drought, trying to draw the correlation between the values there and the values just on the landscape puts us into another level of discussion, which has come up just on the tree mortality side, which is really what is the fire hazard that the tree mortality offers just on the landscape. There actually has been discussions on both sides that the fire hazard exists and there's fire hazard does not exist. There's several research articles that are out there that argue that the fire hazard does not increase with the additional just mortality of trees. There's some use of terminology within those studies that I think amongst the team we are discouraged about their choice just of terminology and what their target is. But in general, we didn't go down that road because there's some argument there. If we choose to utilize vegetation treatment as a fire advantage under this particular landscape. Having said that, of course, I think the commonality is additional fuel loading is generally a negative aspect for future fire hazard and just potential risk. But if you guys would like us to navigate that, we can look at it. But through the Tree Mortality Task Force side, it's been an interesting debate that's going on.
Yeah, I mean about large coniferous trees, but their question is about die-off of chaparral. Increase in the dead component of chaparral, and it's pretty well documented that does affect both the seasonality and the intensity of fire. So it's on the second page of his letter, and in these comments too, where they discuss.
Which comment number?
Well, I'm looking at the letter actually, but maybe we'll address it later. But here it is. Comment A91. Extended drought for the last 4 years has inhibited non-native post-fire vegetation recovery and caused major shrub dieback in unburned areas. Shrub diebacks opened closed canopies, allowed herbaceous field growth in the understory, potentially increased wildfire risk for this year. Even with environmental conditions regarding remaining status quo, the Vtpeir does not offer appropriate solutions to known wildfire problems for our region in a rapidly changing environment. It does not address now new and emerging wildfire threats and how the proposed treatment program may exacerbate them. And that's why I asked about cumulative effects and whether it could be addressed there as well.
We can add some additional language just regarding that in that area.
And I'd also note that some of those changes, he does discuss them occurring in 2016, and there's going to be this inherent lag between when we wrote and we had this historic drought. And so as the literature comes out, we're going to be behind the curve a little bit. So it becomes a question of, do we try to update this in real time? And if we can do that easily in the process, and we'll try to do that.
Can you help me understand this, Sue? So the underlying concern is chaparral is dying for a combination of reasons. But as it dies back, fuel hazard increases because of this herbaceous layer that comes online that apparently is more flammable than the chaparral itself?
Well, the thing about herbaceous layer and chaparral, it's what I was discussing earlier, is that and I'm not, like Keith will always say, we're not scientists here, but as board members, but my understanding is what they're trying to say is that the, chaparral, mature chaparral does not have an understory. The fire moves through the canopy of the shrubs. And when you get die-off from drought, light comes in, and because there's the presence of these annual grass seeds, they come in, and it produces a fine fuel layer that cures earlier than the chaparral, so there's a longer fire season. Plus, it's a flammability issue. Fires get started easier because there's a fine fuel layer that's more receptive to wind and sun and heat and dries out.
So I find this interesting. In one sense, the concern, and working through this myself, is a loss of the chaparral. It's naturally occurring. Now you can compound that loss by treating through herbivory or some other means, try to burn. But when you treat it, the intent is to bring it into a herbaceous layer that may have an extended burn season, but is less volatile and is more controllable.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's almost like catch-22 of sorts here. But to me, it's more about if there's areas on the landscape that people have identified as this is particularly the best habitat, and it happens to be in private ownership over there, and it's outside the WUI, so there's not going to be a public forum, do you or do you not have a say about what they want to do to protect or do that? And if you do think that we should have a say, then I guess we would set aside, kind of like the MLPAs, set aside these islands of the best habitat that are on somebody else's property, and I don't know whether that even falls within our jurisdiction. But I'm trying to get the root of this because this is kind of a catch-22 that we're on the surface here.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, I think it just reinforces that the most controversial part of this planned program is how it's implemented in that one bioregion. And the commenters continually say it's different, and it is.
Yeah, it is. It would be nice if there was an ecological restoration plan for that bioregion that could be used to tear this off of, or one that was accepted that prioritized certain habitats or locales, things like that, so it could be incorporated in here. But it seems like that's being done on the fly because of this document.
Well, I think there's 30 years of contradictory data as well. I mean, every fire we have a new set of information that we didn't realize yet another weird control of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think at the end of this process of commenting, I mean, the board needs to talk about just the broader issue of whether a programmatic document for the entire state can actually address that particular fire region.
Right, I mean, I think we're deep into it now, but I think hindsight, maybe, yeah, I would have considered maybe breaking that off, as a separate programmatic document, because it's where all the comments are landing.
Yes. Why is it too late?
It's not too late.
Why do you say hindsight?
Well, it's always easier to start that way.
Oh, I see.
Than to try to retrofit it.
No, it's okay.
No, it's possible still to have two environmental documents that address different geographic areas. I mean, ideally, you take what we have, and if it's able to be, updated to satisfy everything, that would probably be the best way to go for administration and everything. Right? Costs. I mean, putting together this document is not an insignificant cost to put it. I mean, I guess that's on the table, right? Decide to.
Well, that's kind of after we go through all the comments, it is possible to craft a new alternative out of the components of the existing alternatives. That has been done and is done on a regular basis, but we're not really there yet.
No.
I would just ask that to take a look at some of these, and I understand that these are emerging issues, but if I learned anything from that field trip to Southern California, it was that, there's some massive changes taking place. The Tijuana Slough is just such an incredible example of that, and then the extent of the die-off from the other, it's that, and there is a cascading effect on potential fire behavior. And that's
that's the baseline's dynamic, and it's moving around all the time. We're trying to look at a suite of treatments and the impacts, addressing, mitigating significant environmental impacts of implementing those. But almost every treatment is not permanent. Well, it just sets the stage for certain potential future treatments, or it times out as it being effective, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be a living document that is amended, or the program is necessary to match the changing conditions, right? Somehow.
Well, that would be adaptive management,
Yeah.
and that's another place where some of those concerns could be fleshed out a little bit.
I mean, I understand the concern. People think we're just going to close the door and here we go. Implement. Yeah.
Is that sufficient, Edith, for the... Yeah. Okay, so we are going to move on to Mr. Taylor's comments, and he did make these as an employee of the park, but it looks like we were just CC'd.
Basically, yeah.
And I guess we should talk about whether something that was sent to other people with a CC to us, whether that's actually public comment or not.
If it's CC to us, I think it has to be. I don't see how you can exclude it.
Well, do we say somewhere in our, or requesting other comments, address these comments to the board or so and so? We want to get technical, I don't really exclude something, but I assume we say please address the comments, mail them here.
Well, even though we were CC'd, it seems to me that this is, it's a pretty negative letter, and not particularly respectful of CAL FIRE, but are we able to pull out some things that we want to address here?
A100, right?
A100 to A.
Yes, all the Taylor.
Oh, so all of them?
Yes, there's 5. 100 through 103 come out of this email. It was addressed originally to. He was commenting on somebody else's letter.
I think he was commenting. I don't have the chain of letters with me. I think he given it.
Snowdy Dodson's letter. Did we get a letter from Snowdy?
We did,
Dodson?
yeah.
He's commenting on another letter rather than on the document. That's something different.
Yeah, indeed, that's what it was commenting to us about somebody else's life.
It's more commenting to other people.
Elizabeth Landis. I can't remember who she is.
She did send a letter. I didn't bring the right binder with me.
So he directly sent it to another respondent or comment.
But commenting on somebody else's letter, Snowdy Dodson, who is representing, let's see, Dodson.
In your original binders with the matrix, there should be like that spreadsheet.
I'm just looking for the letter.
Yeah.
It's not very far in. Snowdy Dodson that's the letter from the Los Angeles Santa Monica Mountains chapter of the California Native Plant Society.
So he might have been CC'd on that comment letter and just responded.
Yeah, when Mr. Dodson sent that letter out, he sent it to vegetation treatment, CC'd a bunch of people, and then we got kind of caught up in an email chain of comments.
My thought is if we address as we address the Dodson comments, that will be sufficient to address these comments that are comments on the other comments. Generally supportive, but
Yeah, sure. Then we could CC Robert Taylor's boss at the Park Service. Thank you for your comment.
I would also say that A102, he kind of sets the stage for that sudden of death discussion, which is here is a very clear objective that the program has versus. So he's kind of getting at program objectives. So I feel like we can kind of file some of his comments under that.
okay. Do you think that's sufficient to address this email? If we get to the Dodson comments and we find out that we've missed some of these, we can always circle back. Will that work for you, Edith?
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be valuable when we address these comments to send them back through the park superintendent. That would be the normal way that,
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So that completes page 13, and now we skip ahead. We're going through a time warp, and we're going to go to comment 62 on page 57, which we're moving on. Oh, wait, no, there's some in between. I'm sorry. There's a few about ecological. Where are those?
I thought those were after.
Are they? They're after.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to. Yeah, we're going to move on to 57, And we,
57, is there a letter in front of it? Okay.
Yeah.
But it's 062, comment 062 on page 57. And we started on, I don't remember which workshop we worked on, inadequate data. It was the last one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just, now we're picking up where we left off with inadequate data, with the comment from Drew Fenton, from the community of San Lorenzo Valley.
I had, we left off on 11.1 with 052.
So 052, 053, and 054 are all, well, 054 is a summation, I guess, but 52 and 53 are like a literature review, if you will, of certain. And you're welcome to take a look and review them. And I might have gotten.
Talk about them a lot. You want to go back to the scorekeeper letter?
No, it's okay. That's just where I had it marked, but go ahead, Christine.
Do you have enough information on our comments to her letter? That was the literature review, and it really wasn't about, a lot of the topics weren't really about VTPEIR.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is 062, and this is a short one. It goes back to the bad science and that the document is not science-based.
I mean, those when people are just making kind of broad claims, there's not much really we can do to address those. There's a lot of substantial information in the document.
There's a lot of, I think we just need to say that this document is based on a lot of science.
Right.
I mean, that's an,
we get that comment. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of those that kind of show up. It sounds like we'll have probably a standard response.
Yeah, group them.
Yeah, really.
They are grouped inadequately.
so,
You guys have mentioned this before, but when you're talking about the climate change kind of and the drought stuff about devolving science, it may be a reminder that science isn't like some divine truth, but it's a progress, it's a process, and the living document thing that we talked about before, that as scientific studies continue to give evidence of better treatment practices, they'll be incorporated at the project level, and that's exactly what adaptive management is. And so my hope is that maybe there'll be some actual processes we can outline about how that adaptive management might be incorporated into the VTS. Maybe it's in here already, but that might be something to highlight how the new science will be incorporated intentionally.
so we're good on that one?
I'm happy.
Okay. The next two are from the California Native Plant, one of the many California Native Plant Society chapters, and there's two of them. So I think we can address both of them together.
The language from 072 is also language from the California Chaparral Institute letter.
Yeah,
That
it seems familiar. It looks like both of them are in support of the letter from the California Chaparral Institute. So, Edith, we've addressed a lot of that already. Can you just address this comment with the same response. Is that okay with everybody?
It is. I mean, are we going to get into the details in that response of what are the constraints on widespread conversion of chaparral to grasslands? I mean, that's the underlying fear, is that these swaths of chaparral are going to be converted to grassland in the name of fire prevention. And so somehow, when you address that, we're going to identify here are the constraints. So that's why we don't believe that's going to happen. Now we're going to monitor to see if there's trends in one way or the other.
It's not our goal.
No. Right. So, which leads me to the next step of you want to think, okay, what fundamental changes could we make? Well, should chaparral treatment be limited? I'm not proposing this, but should chaparral treatment be limited to the WUI and the fuel breaks and not be an ecological restoration thing? That seems to be where there's some level of uncertainty of managing chaparral for grassland and calling it ecological restoration, which I don't think it fits into there, so I think you have a hard time making that case as a project. Thinking out loud.
That's what workshops are for.
Right. Good.
So, do you have sufficient?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the next one is 089 is part of a much larger letter that we've addressed many parts of already, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the summary of this is that the spatial modeling is done at the wrong scale. And I don't know, but I don't necessarily think this goes back to how WUI was modeled and the scale of the maps that were used. I don't think we've ever addressed this particular topic before, have we? The team could.
I think Rachel would probably speak to this
Rachel,
best.
yeah.
I will, in reviewing the comments from the previous workshops, we did address this to a certain extent. There were some comments about the scale of the maps. Yeah, it was too hard to see where individual projects were. But part of the response from the board was that, well, when a specific project is proposed, it would naturally have more appropriately scaled maps. Yeah. I'll let Rachel talk about that.
So that Rachel Brady, CAL FIRE, that statement is interesting too because it says that both fuel breaks and ecological restoration was all modeled by California Fire Alliance, if you read that comment, which isn't true. The WUI was modeled by it. Then we took it down to the vegetation layer and modeled it out that way. There's no real way, you're going to have a map of the entire state of California on an 8.5 by 11 page. So there are in Chapter 4 inset maps that kind of give you an idea of what it looks like down at, a 1 to 24,000 scale, which is, a mile per inch. So
it's a general location map.
Yeah, we don't know exactly that the project is going to be right here. If we knew the project was going to be right here, yeah, we can make a map of it, but until we can only say this is the footprint for which projects could occur, not that they are going to occur.
Well, also, the data layers at a finer scale. It's just
Yes.
that you couldn't make a map of the data layer that...
On an 8.5 by 11 page.
Yeah.
Like, if we can blow it up and make it, the size of the room, you can see it in finite detail.
Well, I think what's missed in this is that there is a finer scale layer for the potential areas for the different 3 kinds of treatments. But can we solve that in any way by making it available to people, or so they could look at it on
All those data layers
electronically?
are available through FRAP. All we have done is peel back a few more layers.
Yeah, I would just say, you could say that is the data can't be made into a map, but if
At
you're
the scale
welcome
that
to
they're
see it, it's available from FRAP, and we could even put where it's available.
And I think in Appendix A, it lays out exactly where to find each individual entity that we use to make that final compilation.
Okay. Got it, Edith? Any other comments on that one, you guys?
With this question around this report from Landis, Spencer and Landis, about an outdated problematic fire hazard analysis, is that?
It starts on the next page.
The last paragraph, last sentence of that.
I know the Landis comments start on the next page.
Right.
Yeah, you get a chance to
So
see it.
we'll come back to that on the next comment. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so let's, we now have 2 pages of comments from Frank Landis, California Native Plant Society, San Diego, about inadequate data. Edith, would it be easier to address all of them together, since they come from one letter, or is it best to go through them in chunks?
You could do it kind of all as one letter, just as reading down his comments. You don't have to take it specific the way that I've divided it. Yeah, you could just start at the top and work your way down.
Well, the first one seems like it's a they're saying that some of the science was misinterpreted, but it doesn't really say what.
Do you guys have an idea of what they're talking about?
Well, yeah, there are. He has a couple bullet points there, and then he references the California Chaparral Institute's letter.
But so we know a couple of the papers that are feeling like they've got misquoted or misused?
Yeah, the Chaparral Institute, and I think in another letter or two call out more specific ones.
So this happens a lot when scientists write papers. They don't write it in a way that policymakers can actually figure out what to do with it. And there's a lot of consternation because scientists aren't taught well how to write about applications. So one suggestion that's done super well with the Water Board is when they write a summary of a science paper, they actually check with the scientists to see if that's what they were thinking that they were saying, and then to get modified language as a result. So you can quote the paper and then put in, after personal communication, the intention was to be more focused on this or that other thing. And then they kind of short circuits the critiques that other people might have of feeling like the science was misquoted or misunderstood because you get it directly from the source. So it's a little work, but it can kind of save time later on because you have incorporated their thoughts. And sometimes they'll say, happens to us a lot of times, is they'll actually make policy recommendations, and then when they understand the context, they'll sort of walk it back a little bit. They say, "Ooh, I didn't really mean that, quite that, and now I know the potential implications that are problematic with that statement." Also, super helpful because you get it right from the source.
These are all grouped inadequate data, but I guess we're trying to get to the heart of whether we as a board feel like they're shining the light on inadequacy that we need, a gap that we need to fill.
I personally don't see anything in here that hasn't. This is back to the 1.5 miles, which there's a lot of objections about WUI being characterized as 1.5 miles. But I'm not really sure. But then he talks about very long range spotting in Australia, which is a different vegetation type. There's
So there's a, in the one, I guess it's 149.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a discussion on the wildlife side. I think there's just kind of a misunderstanding sometimes is that maybe they haven't gone to the document and actually found kind of the standard measures that are in place. I don't know if they just missed that and because they want that, I think what they're looking for too is they're looking for a project level scale analysis of the wildlife considerations that this programmatic document just isn't going to happen. We're relying at the project scale that they're going to follow these standard project requirements and implement them, and that's why we think it's going to get through. So that's what I would like to see in an answer, like at least that one. And it probably works in several places, but for this one specifically too.
I try not to take 154 personally, well, so some of these things there's no real answer to, but it sounds like we can use some of the discussion about the programmatic EIR does not address the specific projects, and they will be addressed when at the project scale, when more specifics are available and evaluated.
Plus, 154 is also just the response we had on questioning the science. So we've got plenty of comments along those lines, and the team will have a robust response on that.
Yeah. 185 talks about inconsistencies and.
So are we done with the Landis letter? Is that it?
Do you have enough to address it? Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to 185.
Okay.
You were saying?
Of contradictory statements. I guess I have to look at the letter and see what those are. Do we ferret those out, or is it just be in general?
This is the only comment from this letter that fell in the inadequate data part, so it's doubtful that they elaborated.
Okay. Well, that's not helpful.
Okay.
I think at the last workshop, the chairman was calling these like inoperable.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to a whole series of comments until the end of this section. It does go on. Okay, this, the Center for Biological Diversity, all the comments until page 68 are from this one letter.
To give you some guidance in going through these, if I may, if you look at the number, the letter and number, so in 0202 it says like A, wildfire, et cetera, 1, California mixed conifer. There's usually a short summary of their issue with data the document may have used, but then a lot of the comments following are literature review supporting, their comment. Yeah, so it looks longer than, in terms of discussion points for you, I think it looks a little longer than it actually is. But that might help you navigate the set of comments.
So when the letter is, it's in an outline format. So they're divided up, mitigation measures, reasonable range of justification. It looks like all of this starts in the letter under wildfire, including high severity fires, a natural necessary component of California's forested landscape.
For me, this one is easier to understand if you read the letter.
Yeah, it is.
I'm trying to attempt to go through. One question I had, and it was a legal question more than anything for the team, was it's in the letter, it's on their page, so I don't know where it is on the form we UA, it's on their page 3, and it's just kind of the general standard question is, they're making this claim that the standard project requirements are actually mitigation measures. And they're claiming that this runs afoul of the CEQA requirements. Could you
We are getting council input on that.
You're going to have council work on that
Yep.
issue? Okay, that's one of the ones you're working on. Because that seemed like one of the meaty ones I just didn't quite understand the subtleties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as far as this stuff goes, when I read the letter originally, I thought I agreed with most of the literature and the I couldn't really figure out, especially on this on A, why it was in here. Is it? It seems like he's saying that you didn't, that the team didn't do a complete enough literature search. But I don't see where the literature contradicts what's in the document.
When I read this, it was almost as though he was just saying, why are you bothering to worry about fires? We need more of them. So that's, I didn't really, it didn't seem all that relevant to the task at hand in terms of the VTP program, in terms of actually, looking at the merits of it. Other than just, we don't need to bother. I guess that's maybe just a cynical way. I didn't take much from it because most of it was just about we need more early serial habitat, or we need more snag forests, or what have you. And it's like, well, that's not really relevant to the question. That's what I took it.
The other, and I don't know which one it's under, Edith, but another broad claim that's made in here that kind of caught my eye is the recommendation they wanted as an alternative, but was just the whole from the house out concept, just defensible spaces and protection of structures, and that's it. I know we've dealt with that issue ad nauseum here, and I'm sure the team's got a response that's this broader response that, hey, yeah, that's still going on. We're talking about areas even beyond that. So that seems like that's going to have to be a response as part of this letter too. Because they're making the same, we've obviously seen that numerous letters.
I think it comes down to, okay, that these are all articles that I'm somewhat familiar with. And I just don't see where well, the letter finally gets down to saying that what's recommended in forested habitats contradicts the what's in the literature, but I'm not sure where how this relates to the actual document. Would you? It's a good literature review, and it would be good if we acknowledged a lot of these papers. I mean, they're out there. They're all legitimate researchers.
I think it goes under the category. Fire is a fundamental part of our ecosystem in California. Great, good. Yes, we agree. Go and we also have to manage it in a diverse set of ways, and one of them is our UPP. So I think go ahead. I'm done.
They say they appear to be getting that your program is going to be so effective that it's going to eradicate fire from the landscape.
Wow.
And that's what I read. If there's a concern in here, it's.
Could we maybe get some clarification? It appears like some of the terminology used in here is sometimes referring to severity. They use intensity when it should be referring to severity. So in terms of clarifying on how, do we assume that they mean severity?
People do that all the time.
Because, I just, the aquatic piece just stuck out to me, and it said that high intensity fires had higher biodiversity macroinvertebrates. To me, that clearly means severity in that case. So we make that assumption in response to comments.
I think it's really important to help the commenters with their terminology so that we're all on the same page.
So maybe say under the assumption that you mean severity versus intensity, then address the comment.
Right.
Well, once we get to, everything through E, I think is, it applies more broadly to federal land than it would, the design of a program in federal land than it does to a program in private land.
I think also, Member Gusari, one of the things the team was looking for is actually what you answered a little bit earlier when you said there wasn't any literature sticking out from this that contradicted the literature that we utilize and that this program is relying on, and I think what the team was looking for, and correct me if I'm wrong, as always, kind of from the board a statement, or not a statement, but your direction and guidance if there was any of these that you wanted us to investigate further and see if we needed to revise the science that we use based on one of these papers or.
Well, I don't think until we get to all the way through to F, where the letter changes gears. Well, actually, we talked about the drought stuff already. So until we get to H, I think it would be nice to have a more comprehensive literature review in the document related to forests. There's no doubt about that. But adding these additional papers, I think this is what I would say. Adding the additional papers wouldn't necessarily cause you to draw a different conclusion about how to manage fuels in coniferous forests.
Okay.
I
think that's very helpful.
Yeah, and so I would add, while we're kind of on that line, I guess it's on their page 10 of 35. That's where they launch into, kind of like Member Miles was mentioning, that the high severity fires and all the wildlife species that use those resulting stands, it's almost like they're saying, well, if we eliminate some fires, those, it's going to cause them to actually want more fires out there. But I don't think any of these I would add. I mean, they're good papers in here for sure. I know quite a few of them. But I think, like member who's sorry, I don't think they're going to change the trajectory of what the goal of the plan is that many of these species are not in the areas of where there's dramatic concern in Southern California. A lot of these are actually in the forested environment, a lot of these studies.
Yeah, I think.
Northern California conifer. So I guess I wasn't compelled that was something that we need to go through and start adding these in there. And it also gets to my, you probably know, but it's on page, there's 7, but it's their Roman numeral 5, where it's the broad claim about not based on science or substantial information. I think we've got some already answers in line for that already.
So the team's
looking for more tabs here.
So the team's getting contradictory advice from us. Incorporate this stuff or don't incorporate this stuff.
I don't see why it's necessary if it's not specific. Unless if we were going to eradicate fire, then we wouldn't want to disclose it. At the end of the letter, do they have comments, or do they sum up what their perspective is?
Well, they change gears and talk about it, but we have not gotten to. We'll get to some of these other topics later. In this, because they change gears and go into greenhouse gas and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to see the rest of this in another section.
Yeah, I think the other thing is just, you're probably reading it again. They're hitting. It's frustrating because a lot of our letters, they probably got information from other submitters, and so we're coming down the same themes again and again and again. The thing here is that they, on their page 24, it's this issue of where do you address special status species at the project level, which is what this plan really does. And that's what we're depending on, are these special measures. And I don't know if they just don't believe they're going to work, or they don't trust in the programmatic approach, I guess. I think that's probably it, but I don't know. It's hard to read between the lines on what the motive is there. But I think a response along these lines is that these biological resources, bio 1 through 13 or 14 are going to be addressing these things on a project level scale. I think it needs to be made clear to these. So that's the broad claim they're going after on that page.
We don't make any. We're trying to address fire behavior, but we don't go into the weeds of making claims that as a result of this implementation of this program and these individual projects that are under it, they're going to result in less severe fires. And I can see that's a catch-22 to the audience of, well, if you're not going to have significant effect on fire behavior, there's less severe fires, why are you doing this program? And if you are going to have it, then to what effect is it? Because it could have an adverse effect on the environment. But I don't think we say that we think we're going to reduce severe fires by 12% or 13%. It's more about giving people the opportunity to protect their communities and their life and property.
It's a voluntary program.
Yeah, it's a voluntary program.
Well, I would, all the comments up to that address high-intensity fire and its benefits, I think we should just say that the program is intended to be utilized on private land, and high-severity fire is not compatible with the objectives of private landowners. That goes through the bottom of page 147, because all these studies are first about that natural fire in California in forests are mixed severity with high severity patches, and then it goes into all the reasons why mixed severity fires in forests are beneficial to other habitat components. The landowners who own forested land, whether they're private timberlands or individuals, don't have an interest in creating patches of high severity. Do you think that's a reasonable response to what the objectives? It is advocating for higher fire severity, whether it is part of the natural ecosystem or not, is incompatible with the objectives of CAL FIRE or of the plan.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It takes us through.
And it's not even just it's to me just an uncharacteristic fire, which is almost beyond the high severity. It's climate change.
Well, there is a
lack of any fire for so long that it's not even high severity as we would find it in historic pre-fire records. It's knocking it down a notch or two.
And I guess I would put one extra caveat on there, is that it's not in the objectives of those private landowners that come forward that want to be part of the program, that are voluntarily doing this. They're not being forced to do this. They're not being mandated to do this. Obviously, if they want to be part of the program, they're probably not seeing their objectives. So that could be part of the answer too, I think.
Well, it is not one of the objectives of this program to reintroduce natural fire or natural fire effects on private lands in California, private forested lands in California. I don't think, from anybody sitting here who has a big enough piece of ground to do that, I think you represent industry. I have never heard that as an objective of,
We want more climate. I'll speak for us. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, ideally, there is, can certainly be part of what goes on over time, but it just has to be done at the right intensity and to become a beneficial tool rather than a detriment, which is what it typically tends to be. But to categorically say that we're not interested in reducing fire isn't really right. We would be, but on.
Well, I meant reintroducing mixed severity fire that creates patches of mortality, which is what they're advocating for. That's what I was talking about.
Right. You're right. We would not
agree with that. Except for targeted historical prairies where perhaps you are trying to reestablish a prairie or whatnot. They have private land management areas are targeted for that very thing. But the other part of it is the mitigation, I guess, back to project standard requirements to talk about how we mitigate the loss of trees and snags within a project area. You're not taking out, I can't remember whether that's in here or not, but the habitat that they're concerned about that is created by high intensity fire. I don't think we're proposing anything to reduce those snags in this document. I don't think so.
Well, I If everybody agrees, I think we've gotten through there's almost everything up to page, to the bottom of page 66 is about forests, high-intensity patches, and the impacts on species. Edith, do you think you have enough information to answer everything through the bottom of page
66.
66. So then, the next topic is climate change and wildfire activity.
Starting on page
67. Same letter. And it is, in the actual letter, it's on page 18 of the actual letter, if you're following along.
Which comment is it?
It's the comment about, it refutes a lot of the science or assertions that climate change will increase fire severity.
O212.
Yeah. So it basically says that there's no consensus that climate change will increase fire activity in California. I don't think the plan says that it will. It says that it might.
Yeah, Gabe Schultz. I'm pretty certain we did not use the term will, particularly on something so speculative as that. But we'll take a look just at the language again.
Yeah, I think this is just to make sure that we reflect the uncertainty of well, first of all, of how it's going to play out, and then secondly, how it affects fire regimes. Is that okay? So that covers E. And I'm not sure where, as reviewed by Whitlock, that's also part of, it's part of the same topic.
Yeah, it's following.
So it follows, 213 follows from 212. And then, to finish it off, F, which is bark beetle outbreaks have not increased annual area burned or fire severity.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything in the document about that? Maybe a mention. I don't think it's part of the rationale for the selection of for any decision making in the document. I just say that doesn't apply. So that takes us to the final thing, which Gabe already addressed, which is...
I wouldn't quite dismiss it that way. I'd just say we'll be watching that in part of our adaptive management.
Okay, that's good. Well, Gabe already addressed the next bullet, which is O215, which is dead trees don't cause increased fire severity. There is a lot of controversy over that. Dead trees do eventually turn into dead fuel on the ground, but I think the controversy is over whether standing dead trees increase fire intensity. I've raised that myself, so I know.
Basically, yes. The way that the articles, and I'm going to paraphrase sharply. So And that is, if you put this on a bell curve, there's generally a red phase, a snag stage, and then a down phase, and there's certain different terminology applied to each one of those three categories. But those are basically it. And the indication is that in the red phase, when the needles are still attached just to the tree, you still have the potential for a crown fire. When the needles fall, you have that snag, the potential for a crown fire lessens drastically. And then as the material falls, then for an increase in fire, or just on a ground fire, can potentially increase as a result just of the fuel loading. That's the generalization to those articles. In discussions with Dave Sapsis, there's a lot of our practical knowledge just on the ground when we fight fires within these stands. We have had fires this last summer just occur within portions just of these areas, and the fires do act in a unpredictable manner, and they have the ability to reburn on us if they don't burn everything in its initial run. So from a fire hazard, it's a significant risk to us. From our personnel sake, just as an additional note, when we do helicopter drops and tanker drops, these trees tend to snap out, which increase additional personnel safety issues for us.
Well, those piles of dead branches sure burn fast. I've never had piles before that burned as fast as the ones that came off those drought-killed trees. Big piles too. All right. Well, we've made it through this part of Mr. Wolf's letter, and I think, do you have enough information on all this topic? Let's move on to 242. Marilee Woodhouse from the Battle Creek Alliance, who's supporting Sequoia Forest Keepers' comments.
So when we address theirs, we address hers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's page 147, comment 242.
It's page 68.
Oh, yeah, page 68. We have addressed the Sequoia Forest Keepers' comments. So I guess I would say check. All right, Zachary Principe from the Nature Conservancy California chapter. Yeah, this is one of those ones that's excerpted and it makes it hard to understand. Let's see, Principe. Do you know what the context of this one is, Edith?
Not off the top of my head.
I know we're going to go to the letter.
Yeah.
It appears to be kind of addressing the way we kind of coarsely sort of stratified the state into the three basic wedge formations, as well as sort of generalized fire behavior. And again, we took that framework from the California Science Consortium's review. So it's sort of a kind of a issue of dueling science, I guess. But that was the way that we approached the problem came directly from the California Fire Science Consortium review of the previous document.
Seems like a pretty good answer to the question.
Yeah. All right, so the next one is the Conservation Biology Institute, and that's the next three comments. Wayne Spencer. another, we've seen this one before. It's a lengthy letter, and this is 3 sections of it. There's a section about CEQA, and then I think we're to the section in the letter on poor scientific justifications, which is page 3 of the letter.
Wayne Spencer states that we use 1990 census data in the WUI model. Is that the case? I mean, probably for what the program is attempting to do, it's not a...
Yes, for the original WUI model, but WUI has now been updated, so new census data that was used.
So what, I guess, when we address these things, people are commenting on one version of the document, but we're going to change it. So we're going to say that we have updated the WUI model in the response to these comments.
The WUI model is not necessarily updated. The WUI layer has been
The
updated.
WUI, yeah, that's what I meant. The WUI layer has been updated based on the new demographic data and different fire behavior stuff.
Yes.
The comment about Bonnickson, a lot of people don't agree with Bonnickson, but other people do. He's a controversial scientist, but he's done a lot of writing. This implies that he's not a good scientist, and he's published in reputable journals, and I don't know that this is particularly valid. The first comment about how we shouldn't cite him because he's not reputable. He is a scientist. He has, anyway.
And a retired professor, isn't he?
Well, he was a professor, and he did. He had some controversial personal opinions, but he actually has produced some good peer-reviewed papers in reputable journals. So I think that's kind of unreasonable.
And in the letter, the tone is kind of just, are we using the best available science and stuff? And we already have answers and discussion points for that. It might be out of order there. I'm very sorry, but the one thing that caught my eye that the team needs to address in the letter, I'm not sure where it ended up in these, it's on the letter, it's on page 5. When I read these letters, it talks about how they, along with the Endangered Habitat League, claimed to provide an option or alternative to CAL FIRE. And I guess this is where maybe we need to address that, there's these other aspects of structure protection and the defensible spaces, and then why this wouldn't work and why you went with the alternative you did. Because this is a theme we see kind of in other letters too. This one, it happened to be that they were going to 100 to 1,000 feet within structures. Kind of the letter. It just seems like it's a key point, so I don't know, Gabe, what.
During the original, when we were soliciting input, when we were assembled just originally and evaluating the content of the previous draft, we were trying to identify what we could do to help streamline this particular document in terms of making it much more appropriate than the last draft was. We did actually reach out to some of these groups, and that was brought up when we over verbal conversations with them, and we had discussions, and they did share with us their strategy and input on why the 1,000 foot. To the point when we asked them why 1,000 feet, they didn't provide us any scientific basis to the 1,000 feet. They didn't really provide us any justification to the 1,000 feet. It just was better than the existing movie layer. So it's funny to continuously be challenged about science and then be asked to put something that's not science-based as the threshold to it. We went with what our department has been using. It's something that is reputable. In terms of the 1,000 feet, that actually was calculated. It is part of one of our alternative, not considered categories to help address the situation so that we can identify when this comment came up that, yeah, we did look at it. This is not something that was ignored. It just also conflicts with one of the dominant comments that comes out here is it's not scientifically backed. So in terms of the working from the structure out approach, one of the challenges about this is that it's a volunteer program again. We're not saying, as you mentioned, we're not saying we're trying to reduce fires by any percentage. We're not saying we're trying to make that shift on the landscape, because in order to do that, it has to be a requirement then for that participation on all parties that live just within this. And that's not the way this program works. So consequently, we have already law in place that requires clearance. We already have land use planning in full effect amongst the various counties on what is the appropriate building just material that a house needs to be built at. This is in addition to all of that as an additional tool and option. And that's what I find is lost in some of the comments is it's being identified as more just of a regulatory standard as opposed to that voluntary standard that's on top of the existing regulations and tools available.
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's what just needs to come out in the response to sections just like this, so that they understand. Because that's definitely, that theme carries through. Obviously, it seems like every meeting, about every third letter we go through, that's the theme, is that there's just that misunderstanding. And whether that's in your responses or that's blended into the document itself, obviously that's your choice there. But you can hear that from the board members, and we want to make sure that we have a chance to point somewhere to the public to describe that.
And as a response from the last workshop, or just originally during the board's review of this, you had asked for that to be placed just in multiple places, and we had given the public comment. It was recommended just the last workshop that gets expanded more. So that's actually on our list.
Yeah, I hate to keep bringing it up, but it just as you know, it's frustrating because I agree with you. It's also not only the structure out approach, but just the science, and that's what's being challenged here too. But we have hopefully good responses for that.
Okay, so
Take it out of
no, it was good to revisit that, and we have lots of comments like that, and I think Edith has something prepared. We are going to address it and make it clear. The next comment is again back to inadequate data from a different chapter of the California Native Plant Society, and I think we've addressed all this.
Mm-hmm.
Misrepresented and cited literature, dependence on anecdotal evidence, contradictory statements, ignoring information on record, and cited references missing. Non sequiturs, yes. I actually got an email from this woman telling me to send a letter to the Board of Forestry. It was forwarded. But anyway. All right, so the next thing is back to the scale of the maps, the WUI assessments, and outdated analysis. I think we have answers to that. Yes? From the couple ago. Okay, the next, we have a new commenter, the Earth Guardian Coalition. this is the same letter as we got from the California Chaparral Institute.
With a couple of subtle changes.
Mm-hmm. So we have an answer to that, so we can just give them the same answer?
Well, this is, so the Earth Guardian Coalition sent verbatim the same letter except for 2 paragraphs, one of which is below under inadequate data, and the other one must be elsewhere in this matrix. So this is the language. So except for these 2 paragraphs, yeah, we can respond to the Earth Guardian Coalition letter, this direct them to our response to the Chaparral Institute. But this paragraph is different, and then therefore I thought deserved a second look.
I don't know what to say.
Does the team have any observations on this one? Because it's kind of a somewhat confusing question. Kind of counter-conventional.
Yeah, I think we just need to reevaluate that, any of the statements about Northern Chaparral, and just make sure that the literature, is the text in our documents for better literature. So we can readdress that. That's we're aware of that comment.
Are you going to clarify the treatment of Northern Chaparral, or?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to look at the literature in question and see if we took a leap from what the literature says.
It's more of a fire frequency what happened, right? That's kind of what we're getting at here.
Yeah, and there's just not a whole lot of, there's a lot of data suggesting environmental trade-offs from fuel treatments in Southern Chaparral, and the Northern Chaparral just hasn't been a hub for that sort of research. So, I think from a sort of a mechanistic standpoint, you might be able to transfer some of the knowledge from Southern Chaparral to North, and we just need to look at the literature a little closer, I think.
Okay. So the next one is Carl Andrews, who's basically saying that, well, he's saying what he says. It's that there's not enough information to justify use of fuel treatments, including chaparral treatments. So this is a quote. Is this sentence still in the document? Information on responses of wildlife to fuel reduction treatments, including herbicide treatments, is sparse to totally lacking.
Hey, we can, without a citation from the author, we can.
Well, this is from our doc.
That's what's without the author saying, on page 4-22, we can do one sentence out of this 1,500-page document. We can do a Control F and find it and delete it.
Yeah, I swear you guys brought this up during your review, and I believe we had changed it. Yeah, because this is really tickling me pretty fierce that you guys did address this and we did change this language.
So an old draft, potentially.
Well, it depends on what version that they're looking at.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, that's been a challenging factor.
Yep.
The next comment is from Philo. Oh, somebody from Philo.
Well, that's there. So a couple comments came in that were anonymous to semi-anonymous or not signed, and so that's, I think, the beginning of their email handle. It's the best identifier I could utilize. They were, Philo whatever at Hotmail or something.
think on this one, it wasn't, you say it's, what did Keith call it? It's not a non-starter, what was the term?
Inoperable.
Inoperable, other than maybe encourage them that we believe the teams use the best available science to describe the document. But that's about the only response you can give to that statement.
Okay, well,
Yeah, it's too general.
so the next one is from Pietro Di Girolamo. It's again that it's inaccurate and partially revised, incomplete, inconsistent, and we have an answer, I think, to this already. So the next one is Susan Dobrowolski, and we have an answer that talks about the scale of the program. It's 60,000 acres a year, not millions. Next one is Jim Dugan.
And just to tack on, and not just mere destruction. I mean, that's not the point.
Well, she's imploring you.
Yes.
Mark. I mean, anyway. So, but we do have an answer about the scale of the program that I think will be, we'll cover that. The next one, Jim Dugan. So we have an answer that we're updating the data.
Yep. That should take care of that.
Yeah. Sandy Greenwald, P18.
Data.
Data and Peter, do you think you have enough answers to similar comments to address
Yeah.
or respond to her concerns? Anybody else want to add anything to that one?
Do we have maps of old growth chaparral?
We keep seeing that. I mean, there's veg mapping. I don't know.
Well, there's no such thing.
I know.
Old growth chaparral there's no such thing as old growth chaparral. It's a term that's been coined, but it's gotten into the
Popular literature.
well, yeah, it's gotten onto social media or somewhere. Old growth chaparral. It isn't something you'd have to first define it, and then I suppose you could map it based on certain criteria. Are we okay?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, the whole adaptive thing, if there's special treatment areas that get identified,
Right.
special habitat features that come up in the scoping or the work on an individual project, and additional protection measures can go in. I mean, that's going to be the way it works. It has to.
But in addition to, it's not a term that is, when we do look at projects at the project scale, then we would find out if there were if they include chaparral that exceeds an age threshold. If it's below that, then,
Yeah.
you know.
Age or condition or.
Well, we already have those, well, at least for ecological restoration, we already we were saying we're going to look at that.
And an age threshold?
Yeah,
And
it's in there not for field breaks and for WUI, but for ecological restoration. The condition class is another term for time since last term.
because that's what kicks it out of, what makes certain chaparral high value and kicks it out of the programmatic approach that you have to do additional review. So I just sketched out several stage, endangered species. Actually, that's plant itself is an endangered rare species. Just appreciate it. I missed that we had several stage as one of the triggers for.
Well, they don't. They're using condition class, but it is similar. It's time. It's a return interval, and it varies by vegetation type.
Yeah.
And for chaparral, there's special protections that so that areas won't be treated too frequently. Yes. Yes. Okay. Nodding. Everybody's nodding. Okay, good. So I think we can move on to the next one, 2 from Teresa Hakala. We have an answer to the first one. 22 million acres are not targeted for brush clearance. Obsolete scientific literature. And the other thing we could say to this one is there is a difference in how different vegetation types are treated at the project scale. Then this is a list of big fires. You guys know that. The next one.
Sorry, just a point of process.
Yeah.
We said we're going to end at 4. It's
Right.
4:10. I'm for keep going to
3:10.
3:10.
3:10.
Trick clock. I'm keeping an eye.
Believe me, I'm keeping an eye on it.
Yes, that
It's
clock.
off.
They just haven't reset the clock.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Been sitting here sweaty for 20 minutes.
It seems like 4:10. So do you want to go on for
Please
the rest
do.
of
I was
the
going to say
3 hours?
please follow on
Okay.
anyway.
Now, we are going to end at 4, though.
We have to
say
end
that.
at 4, yeah.
We had a goal of finishing all of it, but a more realistic goal of getting to page 91. I think if we got to page 91, that would be pretty good.
That was an optimistic goal. I thought we would get to page 77. We'll probably get further than that.
Okay.
So the next thing, the next one, I'm not sure what to do with P28. It's a list of bad fires, and she asked us to schedule interviews with several recognized biologists. We already have worked with more than several recognized biologists. Yes?
For 15 years in at this point.
All right. Okay, the next one, Lori Paul, brings up again that the data is very old, and then brings up the massive removal of old growth chaparral. So you have answers for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody okay with that?
Okay with that.
All right.
Can you, anybody else want to take a break or just keep
Yeah.
going and then leave the room as necessary? You okay with that?
I'm okay with that. Only one person can leave at a time.
Right. Not everybody. Do you want to take a break?
I'm fine.
I mean, it's hard to do this
For 3 solid hours?
3 solid hours without a little bit of break.
Well, should we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break. But first, let me just ask, are there anybody online who is posing a comment, or is it just a listening at this point? Okay. We'll make sure at the end that those, somebody's going to spend this much time with this workshop, we want to make sure they get questions and comments in, as necessary. All right, 5 minutes. Let's get back to page 71.
Oh, back to page 71, I'm ready. All right, you guys. You'll be surprised at how fast we get through this stuff. Okay, we started on Lori Paul's comments letter, and before we took a break, and now we've got another section from her. And it's interesting because she says that the concerns that were expressed about from the Chaparral, the California Chaparral Institute and CNPS were not addressed by the new version of the EIS. And I guess I would just ask the team whether that's correct or not, and how we answer that. I think we've been pretty responsive based on going to Southern California, having a bunch of listening sessions, and then bringing these same people into the process.
Correct. We have, I think, put quite a bit of effort into it. The challenge being is that as we were working together, just initially trying to come to an agreement on kind of the format and layout just of the programmatic EIR. From a department standpoint, we did try to make efforts. Department and board, sorry. Standpoint in our communications with them was to try to build a bridge towards them to come to some consensus disagreement that, okay, we can't meet everything that you want, but can we come together in agreement that we're going to meet at least halfway? And initially, when we made the adjustments on our end, there was no adjustments on their end. And so fundamentally, there was no way that we could go halfway and still make it work without the other half being there to help just to support it. So I guess where I'm at just on the subject matter is we've been there just to try to make it work.
I would also add that the California Fire Science Consortium review was a product of that. Basically, all the comments that we received on that 2013 draft, and I feel like we remained fairly true to the recommendations of that review. So I feel like we were responsive to a lot of concerns from the 2013 review. There's a lot of comments though, right? So it's hard to basically address every single one.
A lot of them are rather vague too, which is frustrating. Is there one or two key things that we couldn't compromise on that you could give me a hint on what to make besides no program?
I guess. Well, I don't think was the last draft even really focused on the WUI. That was maybe one of the complaints, and that was actually part of the CFSC review told us to concentrate on that. So that may be a more recent comment, but I do think that generally you're going to get criticism about sort of are you too vague in your analysis at the statewide kind of programmatic scale, and it's just very hard to tackle that particular issue. But we probably should kind of go through the 2013 and see what the general theme was, and then see how
it changed.
Yeah. Well, I can approach some of it. Probably fundamentally out of the gate is one of the arguments that came out of a lot of these letters that came in. Except in our case, it was misinterpretation. Under the last draft, they were just proposing, I believe it was 215,000 acres be treated each year. When you mathematically plan that out for how many acres are in the state of California, you can quickly have California completely cured of fire. And that's totally inappropriate to look at a document and have acreage that just project that. However, it was always of interest to allow an increase in acres for treatment. When we originally came out with our estimate acres of 60,000, I know amongst the board and the team we had quite a bit of discussion. For 60,000 disappropriated, it didn't sound just enough, but in practice compared to our other programs, it was more than what we are currently doing. So it's a tough thing to talk about that acreage approach. Second, a lot of the last draft. When I was originally brought into the team, my very first task was to dissect what was salvageable, and then formulate the team and get them going on bits and pieces to identify, what can we stand behind, meaning the data. Can you find that data? Does continuous numbers from that data? A lot of that stuff we simply could not do because we could not find that data. And so as a result, instead of carrying forward elements that we couldn't stand and back up, we dropped it. And it required us to create the wheel again, so to speak. The other fundamental challenge about that last draft was it was difficult to read. And I know we discussed it here during the board's review, but that document looked and felt and read like 10 different offers, and it was very difficult to connect the dots throughout that document. So that correlated to a lot of the questions and some comments coming out. Is there was some contradictory elements that were directly stated, but elements that from our team structure and from the format that we were trying to process this version, trying to exclude that and give it a much better singular voice, even though despite we had 8 different folks dominantly writing that language. So fundamentally, those were the big ones. Now, what was off chart? A lot of the chaparral was still part of that target. Ironically, one of the heavier sections of the last draft was the herbicide, and the herbicide has fundamentally been an issue for the vegetation treatment program over its 15-year lifespan. But the last draft really did an exceptional job at bulking that up with a lot of good sound data. This draft, we actually carried that forward, but had a third-party review of the content of that herbicide side section, along with those comments in addition to it. So some modifications were made there. Fundamentally, there was no checklist, so there was a lot of reference about a checklist in that older draft. When you went through it, there wasn't one. There hadn't been one made. So it's very difficult to talk about a programmatic EIR when you have nothing to tier from, or just to guide that tiering. So there were comments circulating that particular issue of where is this kind of question. Fundamentally, though, the negative feedback about that last version, the origin appears to still be the negative feedback we're dealing with just on this version. So it's been very difficult to try to come to compromise over this subject matter.
Well, the other thing this comment brings up, just to make sure that you don't miss it, is that she says that we should apply funds to effective near real-time detection of fires from orbit fast enough that fires can be extinguished before they rage out of control, and refers us to the NASA JPL website. So I don't think we have to address that. It doesn't have to do with field treatment. And then we need a little bit about good science, Edith. So you got that, right?
You.
Okay. So are you okay with moving on to Peter St. Clair?
Yeah.
We're not going to address the CEQA comment, which is at the end, but it's about the scientific research and data on vegetation types throughout the state. And I really don't know what CAL FIRE data he's referring to.
Yeah, it's that general, it's hard to use the comment, effectively and look at what the issue might be.
Anything else there?
That was on the next one, actually.
I think we have enough to answer that one, yes?
Yep.
Okay, so the next one is about, I actually agree with, not how they said it, but I do think that it's difficult to, and I think in the document we cite literature that acknowledges that it's difficult to reconstruct natural fire regimes in chaparral. We agree. So can we move on to Mark Weissman? Matt Weissman.
Yeah.
It's another way of saying everything's it's outdated and we have a response for that. Is that sufficient? Okay, the next one, C.J. Fotheringham. It's just contrasting the last draft with this one.
Mostly about citations that were in the reference list. That's, if that was the case, that's been fixed.
Enough on that one? So there's 2 more comments from this individual. The next one,
I doubt the program thinks it claims their own size of fire.
Yeah, or now under certain conditions, all bets are off. I'm not going to guarantee that.
we agree with this, right?
This is the type of comment, members, where we can go back and look at the language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just make sure that we don't say anything like that.
Yeah.
Universally.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what to do with the fire-branded field bed literature. I think this person has done some of it. I know I've read their papers. I can't remember exactly what they are, but I think that's an area where they've done some work.
Well, it says they list a number of studies and documents in their letter. So
Yeah, I think we just need to go back and check that letter. Okay, so are you all right with moving on? We're going to skip the rest of the page. And we're also going to skip all of the CEQA pages. And we're going to get started again with ecological values on page 76 of 147. And we're back to some excerpts from Frank Landis's letter. This is
well,
it is a long document.
Did we say that we were skipping CEQA type questions?
Yes, we are.
Or, I mean, this is really swirling.
The threshold is a CEQA thing. Is that the one we're on?
Are you going to bring that back, Edith? Is that?
Council.
The CEQA stuff we are not going to address today. But
Yeah, so-
Do you think we shouldn't address the ecological values?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
19.
Yeah, I think we should look at, starting with 0119 on page 76.
Yeah.
Questions about the adequacy of the
We're not
document
gonna
under
address-
CEQA.
I'm sorry, I was unclear, but we're skipping all of the CEQA and going to, like I said, page
Oh, I'm sorry.
76 of
Yes.
137.
0119.
Yeah, I was one off. I'm sorry.
I was too. I just looked at Landis' changes.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I see the problem.
Yep.
The land is in this case.
Wow, he says it's not long enough.
You guys did a great job, very efficient.
It's not long enough. I don't know.
I don't think it is, because that was also referred to with respect to, proper analysis of all the potential ramifications would require thousands of pages. It's to be thousands of pages, so it's that, I don't know, the anomaly of trying to analyze every, project level situation in a programmatic environmental impact report, which they're always wanting more. They're wanting more detailed maps, but then it just would become obviously it's not the purpose of having a programmatic impact report. So
Yeah, he's comparing a programmatic EIR with a different type of environmental document.
Well, I think it'd be reasonable to say what the purpose of the programmatic EIR is, and that the specifics will be, that address biodiversity will be addressed at the project, in the project level analysis.
With more pages to come.
Is that good enough? Is that, okay, that's adequate. The next comment is P4, which is at the bottom of page 76. And it's also ecological values. It's from Ted Karazgosian, and it's not very complimentary. But I think that what's that category that the chair uses?
Inoperable.
Inoperable. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think we agree with the second sentence.
Yeah, or the last sentence, which designates a different agency to have reasonable management.
all right. So we're going to go with Brooke Colburn. I think this boils down to chaparral. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And we have an answer for that.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next one from Alicia Forsman.
I agree. We tried to temper this at one point. Remember?
Certainly in the earliest versions it had that. terminology. And I think that's been somewhat corrected.
Get rid of the derogatory terms of brush.
Do we have
Tried a little bit.
The sections on chaparral are really specific about species composition, and that was a change that was made from the last version.
vegetation, shrub? I don't know if you use brush.
Yeah, we did make an effort to adjust this terminology, but one of the challenges with it is how we generally talk about fuels. And when we talk about fuels and fuel management, we do tend to categorize things into 3 categories. And that's a challenge when we try to make adjustments for examples like this. I mean, yes, to identify the characteristics and the values of the individual species, absolutely, just on the project scale. That's all part of that analysis that you end up going through. We did increase that terminology, broaden it out within this programmatic EIR, but when we talk about field types, we do bunch those into the 3 categories because that's the normal terminology just applied.
So to the extent we provide official response to this, that is the response.
I would think that applies to the next one as well. From yeah, the birds that fill the air with song. It's about biodiversity, and we have an answer for that as well. We're doing a better job.
Well, I think our second sentence hits the nail on the head as the main problem statement of the whole program.
Which one? I live in the middle of beautiful California chaparral. California chaparral covered hillsides. Yeah.
Well, it's the subdivisions in the chaparral that are leading to the need, the purpose of the need, and that's the real crux, really, in the chaparral, in my opinion. So, yes. Having grown up in San Diego.
Well, she goes on.
Sorry.
Yes, she goes on to discuss what her neighbors do.
Well, that's on it. Proactive.
Yeah. But I don't think it really, it doesn't seem to apply to, I don't know, do you remember this comment? Is there more context?
There is a bit more from this commenter that I would have thought would have continued in the ecological value section, but I guess I determined it had to do with something else. But it's escaping me what the latter half of the letter would have been about.
Well, let's find it. Spolsky.
No, she's mostly focused on program effectiveness. There's the main paragraph.
Yeah, sure.
Found it.
Yeah. So these are all reasons. She says these are examples of find a better way
Yeah.
than this. And also, it's anonymous because the last time she sent in a public comment, the fire inspector descended on me and harassed me.
Great.
Well,
Coincidence.
Well, I think we can say that the activities described in the letter would not be occur under the VTP, and I don't know whether we want to say something about address the fire inspector's retaliation. We'll probably just leave it.
no, I would just say,
No, I'm just,
yeah, the things she lists are out of the scope of the DT.
yeah, they are. Well, also, it wouldn't occur.
Yeah.
So the next comment is Amber Swanson. It's about Chaparral again. I think we have a comment that addresses that. The plan deals with diversity and the scale. The next comment, is that okay? And the next one, Elizabeth Wallace, is very similar. We've got we're addressing that issue of chaparral being replaced by grassland with quick-moving fires, and also the erosion connection. Okay with that? You've got an answer. Ann Wellhouse wants us to sign our names so we know who to blame.
On that, just because someone has done these things doesn't mean it was under the VTP as well.
No.
So that's what this VTP is trying to prevent this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's right.
P66 and P67, herbicide and with biodiversity, chaparral. Edith, have we developed a response to herbicide yet, or we're waiting till we get to those comments that are specific about it?
We did do some discussion about herbicide, I think, a few meetings ago. But I think we might be waiting on more. I think that's something the team is going to be discussing in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, to see if we need more. But I know we did discuss it a little bit in maybe August or September.
And I don't know about whether we really addressed this connectivity issue about fragmentation. Have we produced an answer about fragmentation?
I don't think so.
I think the answer is that fragmentation is the scale of program isn't going to produce that level of fragmentation, and the fragmentation is mostly a result of development. Anything else on that one?
Well, I think be careful when we're using, maybe parroting back their terms of fragmentation, is that, yeah, you're right, but it's a permanent conversion like a road or a house. That's, in ecological terms, that's fragmentation. But what we're proposing is this is just modification of fuels and habitat that is somewhat temporary in nature, so that'd be more creating heterogeneous habitat conditions. There's a subtlety and difference there. And sometimes you just get.
I used she didn't use fragmentation. She used chopping California's habitats into little disconnected pieces. So we shouldn't say fragmentation.
Right. We'll use that heterogeneous, because that in the wildlife community that gets thrown around.
Yeah, it does. I spend too much time with wildlife biologists. So there's one more on ecological values. About clearing chaparral willy-nilly from Nona Zandri.
Must be the last letter, then, if it's in alphabetical order.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
it's about chaparral.
Yeah, and I think also we've got responses for that. This also goes along the lines of Member Loforto's suggestion is that there's a broad claim of misrepresentation in contacting a few of the authors. If there's simply one particular paper, everybody can be home and
Okay, we're through ecological values. Any more on that?
Well, we could either stop because it's 10 minutes to 4, or begin on environmental impacts analysis.
Which runs through 90.
It goes a long way.
Yeah.
I advocate for.
Yeah, I think we can demonstrate to Chairman Gillis
Moved it.
great progress.
We moved it.
Yeah.
We've moved the rock.
So staff, anything more from us? I mean, some of these we're going through pretty quickly and just kind of nodding that you understand where we're coming from. Yes, we hear from you. That wasn't the case.
Make sure you do something about that remote sensing system that will instantaneously detect fires and then put them out.
Does it put them out too? I only thought it detected them.
Let's check on people who were dialed in at the workshop to see if there's any comments.
Any emojis? No. It's good.
Okay, any closing thoughts from board members about this process and where we are? It looks like at least one more workshop. 2? Well, maybe 2. Does it seem to be working to kind of read ahead?
Yeah, I'm going to make another pledge to myself to make sure I understand the constraints on over this concern about this widespread temporary conversion of chaparral. It's ringing loud and clear. There's a concern about that. We need to be comfortable.
You know, the one thing that would help you with the process is to plan ahead on what we're going to look at the next workshop. I think it might help Edith too. So maybe we can set a goal for the next workshop so that we take a look at the letters and
Specifically
what we're going to be looking at. So it would start on page 79 at U7. I think we can do the environmental impacts analysis, and some of it's already done. And we're going to get into some more specific topics. A lot about climate change, and it's possible. Let's see. Could we get through the entire environmental impacts analysis next workshop? It would go all the way to page.
It goes to page like 117.
121.
Pardon?
Pardon?
Yeah, 121.
To page 121.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. It looks like 2 or 3
Yeah,
more after
yeah.
that, though. Mitigation is huge.
Yeah.
And then there's some little sundry ones after that. But mitigation's big one.
I don't know if before then or if we're talking about CEQA and environmental analysis and having legal feedback by then. Yes.
Mark, I got a question on here. When would this continue? What is the schedule for future workshops?
Okay. What is the schedule for the future workshop? It would probably be similar to this format.
It's
Afternoon, January
24th.
January 24th, 1 to 4.
And then March 7th.
The next opportunity would be March, because we don't meet in February. So March 7th, which would be an afternoon on a Tuesday, 1 to 4. I guess we could discuss whether you want to go 1 to 5, or to try to pick up the pace. Or I mean, it's hard. It's not easy to get through all these and be effective after 4 hours or 3 hours probably. Maybe that's just a good healthy number of
time TBD.
Time, yeah. We'll announce it, but tentatively, the next one, the 24th, 1 to 4. Beyond that, we shouldn't reach too far.
And we're going to do 50 pages.
Well, it's not every page is created equally, so some we can go through quickly.
And I appreciate the staff packing these binders around, because it allows me to leave this here, and then I can print out the letters online. I can get those that makes it a lot easier. I can read the letters. They're a lot more portable. So I appreciate this, Edith, and the staff. Great.
Yeah, and I'm going to leave mine.
Yes.
Because I took it home, and then
Yeah.
I brought it back.
Me also. Here it is.
All right.
I think they're all leaving already.
Okay. With that, I guess we'll
Bless your hearts.
close the workshop and see you tomorrow morning at 8.